Hey guys, tonight we're stepping away from the gentle glow of our screens and the steady hum of our heaters, and slipping back into a world where winter wasn't a scenic backdrop for holiday photos, but a brutal months-long siege on survival. You're standing at the edge of a medieval village as the last leaves of autumn cling desperately to the oaks, and the wind carries a new, sharper tone, a promise of the deep cold to come. You probably won't survive this. Your modern body, accustomed to central heating and thermal socks, is about to learn what cold really means. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And while you're at it, drop your location and local time in the comments. Let's see where in the world our little campfire circle stretches tonight. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. The change is subtle at first. It's in the way the morning dew lingers as frost on the tough grass at the edge of the forest, crunching under your thin leather shoes. It's in the breath of the oxen, pluming in thick, white clouds as they pull the last harvest wagon from the field. The sun, a pale, weak coin in a steely sky, provides light but no warmth. You pull your coarse wool tunic tighter, but the wind finds its way in, a cold blade sliding between the threads. There's a new urgency in the village. The leisurely pace of late summer is gone, replaced by a frantic, collective energy. Everyone is moving with a purpose you haven't seen before. This isn't just another day. This is preparation for a war against the sky itself. Your first task is wood. Not just a few logs for tonight, but mountains of it. You join a stream of villagers heading towards the Lord's forest, your axe feeling heavy and unfamiliar in your soft hands. The forest, once a place of dappled light and birdsong, now feels like a grim treasury. Every fallen branch, every dry log, is a piece of currency for the coming months. You watch an old man named Egbert, his back bent like a bow, expertly sizing up a fallen birch. His swings are economical, powerful. He doesn't waste a single motion. For him, this isn't a chore. It's a ritual of survival passed down through generations. You try to mimic him, but your swings are clumsy, your aim poor. The axe head bites into the wood at a wrong angle, sending a jarring shock up your arms. Egbert chuckles, a sound like stones grinding together. "The cold will teach you," he says, not unkindly. "Or it will bury you." A mainstream historical fact, the right to collect firewood was strictly controlled by the manor lord, and peasants were often only permitted to gather windfall, branches already dead and fallen. Cutting down a live tree could result in severe fines or punishment. So, you're not just fighting the cold, you're navigating a labyrinth of feudal law with every stick you gather. Back in the village, the activity is a symphony of survival. The blacksmith's hammer rings out more frequently, not for swords or fancy goods, but for repairing plowshares and strengthening axes before the ground freezes solid. The sound is the heartbeat of the village's anxiety. Women and children are everywhere, gathering not just wood, but anything that burns. Dried reeds from the riverbank, bundles of heather, peat cut from the bog and stacked into crumbling, earthy bricks. A quirky, fringe theory suggests that some communities might have mixed animal dung with straw to create slow-burning, smoky briquettes when wood was desperately scarce. You look at the pile of cow patties drying near the barn and make a mental note to avoid being downwind on burning duty. Historians still argue whether the average medieval peasant household stockpiled enough fuel to last the entire winter, or whether the deepest months were a constant, shivering battle against depletion. Looking at the growing stack outside your one-room cottage, you desperately hope it's the former. The final, most telling sign of the coming freeze is the slaughter. The sound is unmistakable and grim. The pigs that root lead in the autumn orchards, the geese that honked indignantly at your heels, their time has come. There will be no spare mouths to feed over the winter. The air takes on a metallic, coppery scent mixed with wood smoke. The meat will be salted, smoked, packed away in barrels. Nothing is wasted. The blood becomes pudding, the offal becomes a stew for today, the hides are scraped and stretched to become blankets or to line winter boots. It's a sobering, pragmatic process. Life is being converted directly into the potential for future life. You are no longer just a farmer. You are a capacitor, storing summer's energy against winter's drain. As the sun sets, the temperature drops with a shocking speed that your modern physiology finds offensive. The warmth bleeds from the world in minutes. You carry an armful of precious wood into your cottage, a structure of wattle and daub that suddenly seems terribly flimsy. The single room is dark, the air inside already colder than the air in your modern refrigerator. You look at the hearth, a simple stone pit in the center of the room with a smoke hole above, and you understand, for the first time, that this small, dark circle is the heart of your world. Your survival, for the next several months, will be measured in inches from this flame. The creeping chill has arrived, and the long, cold war for warmth has just begun. The memory of that first, shocking drop in temperature is still fresh in your bones as you wake to a morning so cold your breath hangs inside the cottage, a persistent, ghostly cloud in the dim light. The fire didn't just die overnight, it was utterly vanquished, leaving behind a mound of gray, lifeless ash in the hearth. The chill is no longer an external threat. It has permeated the walls, the floor, the very straw of your mattress. It has become a physical presence, a heavy, silent weight pressing down on everything. Your first, most critical task of the day is no longer to eat or work, but to conquer this small, stone circle and bring fire back into the world. You shuffle to the hearth, your bare feet recoiling from the frozen dirt floor. Your tools are simple, almost pathetic in their primitiveness. A piece of flint, a small bar of steel, and a nest of dried moss and fibrous tinder called tow. You've seen this done in movies. A quick, dramatic spark and whoosh, a roaring blaze. The reality is a lesson in profound frustration. You strike the steel against the flint. A tiny, insignificant spark fizzles into existence for a nanosecond and dies in the cold, still air. You strike again, and again. Your fingers, already stiff and numb, fumble with the objects. The flint bites into your thumb. You're not creating fire, you're just making a series of sharp, annoying noises. A mainstream historical fact, the development of the Striker-Light, this very flint and steel method, was a significant technological advancement over older techniques like fire bows or fire plows, but it still required immense skill, dry tinder, and a frustrating amount of luck. On a damp, cold morning, it could take an agonizingly long time, a daily test of patience and dexterity that could dictate the mood of the entire household. After what feels like an eternity, a single, brave spark lands in the heart of your mossy nest. You freeze, holding your breath, and lean down to blow on it with the gentlest exhalation you can muster. A wisp of smoke curls up, smelling of promise. You blow again, a little harder. The spark glows red, then orange, and suddenly a tiny flame licks at the dried grass. A wave of relief, so powerful it feels like warmth itself, washes over you. You carefully feed it slivers of wood, then twigs, then finally a small log. The fire crackles to life, its light dancing on the walls, its heat a palpable force pushing back against the oppressive cold. In this moment, this small, flickering victory feels more monumental than any modern accomplishment. But the battle is far from over. A fire is a living, breathing, and notoriously fickle entity. It demands constant attention. It sputters if the wood is too green, it devours fuel at an alarming rate if the logs are too dry, and a single misplaced gust of wind down the smoke hole can fill the entire cottage with an eye-watering, lung-choking cloud. You learn to bank the fire at night, covering the embers with a ceramic cover or a thick layer of ash to slow their consumption, praying they'll still be alive in the morning. A quirky tidbit. Some households used a fire pot, a lidded clay pot filled with slow-burning peat or dung that could be carried, embers intact, to a neighbor if their own fire died, a literal lifeline in a community bound by shared survival. The hearth becomes the center of your universe. All life revolves around it. The old and the very young are given the spots closest to its warmth. Cooking happens directly over it, in a single pot suspended from a chain. What little light exists after sunset comes from its flickering glow and the occasional rushlight, a reed dipped in animal fat that burns with a smoky, sputtering flame. There is no reading, no intricate craftwork. The fire itself is the evening's entertainment, its hypnotic dance telling stories of its own. Historians still argue whether the central, open hearth was more beneficial for providing radiant heat or detrimental due to the significant heat loss through the smoke hole, not to mention the constant risk of setting the thatched roof ablaze. Sitting here, feeling the heat on your face while a draft snakes up your back, you understand it was a dangerous, inefficient, but absolutely necessary compromise. The smoke, too, becomes a character in your daily life. It doesn't all escape cleanly. It pools under the roof, seasoning the rafters and everything hanging from them with a thick, pungent layer of soot. It stings your eyes and leaves a constant, acrid taste in the back of your throat. Your clothes, your hair, your skin, they all smell of wood smoke. It's the perfume of survival. You learn to breathe shallowly, to position your stool just outside the worst of the haze. But you also come to appreciate its preservative qualities. Meat and fish hung in the roof space are slowly cured by the smoke, their surfaces turning a dark, leathery brown, safe from the flies of summer and the rot of winter. As the day wears on, you become a tender to the flame, a keeper of the heat. You learn its moods. You know the satisfying roar of dry oak, the quick, hot flare of birch, the long, steady burn of well-seasoned ash. A poorly chosen piece of wood isn't just an inconvenience. It's a waste of precious energy, a theft from your future comfort. The fire is no longer just a tool. It's a member of the household, a temperamental, hungry, but utterly essential beast that you must feed, nurture, and placate. Its survival is inextricably linked to your own. And as the wind begins to howl outside, rattling the shutters, you stoke it a little higher, grateful for its stubborn, defiant heart in the deepening cold. The fire's heat is a fierce but fleeting comfort, a small island of defiance in an ocean of cold. You quickly realize its reach is pitifully short. Just a few feet from the hearth's glow, the chill reclaims its territory with a vengeance. This is when you truly understand the inadequacy of your shelter. The walls of your cottage, which seemed sturdy enough in the autumn sun, are now revealed as a porous barrier, a sieve for the winter wind. You can feel the air moving, a constant, subtle flow that steals the warmth from your skin as fast as the fire can provide it. The battle for warmth now becomes a battle of inches, a desperate campaign to seal every crack and exploit every form of insulation this crude world can offer. You run your hand along the wall, a lattice of woven sticks and branches known as wattle, daubed with a mixture of clay, dung, and straw. It feels cold and damp. In places, the daub has shrunken and cracked, leaving gaps that let in thin blades of icy air. Your first task is to repair these breaches. You use more daub, your fingers turning numb and clumsy with the wet, frigid clay, stuffing handfuls of straw into the largest holes. It's a crude patch job. You know the next heavy rain or frost will likely shrink this new daub as well, reopening the wounds in your walls. A mainstream historical fact. While stone buildings were better, the wattle and daub construction of most peasant cottages was surprisingly effective at regulating temperature in milder seasons, but its insulating properties, known as the R-value today, were abysmally low, making winter a constant, losing battle against conductive heat loss. The windows are the next frontier. They aren't glass. That luxury is for the church and the Lord's manor. Your windows are simply shuttered openings. You close the heavy wooden shutters, plunging the room into a deep, smoky twilight, but the wind still whistles through the gaps between the planks. You take old rags, scraps of cloth too worn for even patching clothes, and stuff them into these cracks. It's a small victory. The constant whistling diminishes to a faint sigh, but the darkness is now absolute, broken only by the fire. This is the winter trade-off, light for warmth. You will live in a dim, fire-lit cave for months. The floor is your next enemy. It is simply packed earth, and the cold seems to be rising directly from it, a deep, grounding chill that seeps into the soles of your feet and climbs up your legs. You scatter fresh rushes and straw over it, thickly, creating a loose, crunchy carpet. It helps, a little. The dry plant matter creates a thin layer of dead air, a primitive insulator between you and the frozen ground. But it also becomes a repository for everything dropped, spilled, or tracked in. You know that by spring, this strata of winter will be a compacted, fragrant archaeological record of your family's survival. A quirky, fringe tidbit. Some historical accounts suggest that in certain regions, peasants might have used dried bracken or ferns mixed with aromatic herbs like lavender and mint, not just for a sweeter smell, but in the belief that their thicker, frond-like structures trapped more warm air than straw alone. You look at the pile of standard straw and sigh, making a note to look for ferns next summer. The roof, a thick thatch of reed or straw, is both a blessing and a curse. It provides excellent insulation from above, far better than the walls, trapping the heat from the fire that rises and pools in the smoky darkness of the rafters. But it's also home to a host of other residents. You hear them skittering and rustling above you. Mice, rats, perhaps even a hedgehog that has burrowed in for its own winter sleep. You've made a truce with them, for now. They are, in their own way, a sign of life, and their body heat, however minuscule, is added to the collective warmth of the household. Historians still argue whether the average peasant dwelling was significantly warmer than the outside air due to body heat and the fire, or whether the poor insulation meant the inside temperature often hovered just a few degrees above freezing. As you pull your damp wool cloak tighter, watching your breath mist in the firelight, you're leaning heavily toward the latter. You do what you can to consolidate the warmth. A heavy, woven wool blanket is hung over the doorway, adding another layer against drafts. The family's single room becomes a multi-purpose chamber for living, sleeping, eating, and even housing the most valuable or vulnerable animals. A newborn lamb, a sickly chicken, might be brought into a corner, their body heat a small contribution to the communal effort. The space is cramped, smoky, and smells powerfully of earth, smoke, damp wool, and living creatures. There is no privacy, no quiet, no clean, crisp air. But there is, you hope, a slightly better chance of making it to dawn without frostbite. The walls may be of wind and straw, but you are learning to fortify them with sheer, stubborn determination. The fire can only do so much, and the patched walls only block so much wind. Soon you understand that your primary, most mobile defense against the cold is what you wear. Getting dressed in the morning is not a matter of style or even simple modesty. It is a slow, deliberate process of building a personal fortress on your skin. Each layer is a battlements, and the removal of any one piece is a calculated risk you only take when absolutely necessary. It starts with the base layer, a long, shirt-like garment called a smock or chemise, made from coarse, undyed linen. It scratches against your skin, but it serves a vital purpose. It absorbs sweat and body oils, protecting the more valuable, harder-to-clean outer layers. There are no buttons or zippers. Everything is tied, laced, or simply pulled on. Next come the hose, not the modern kind, but two separate legs of wool, like long socks that reach to your upper thigh, tied to the waist of your braise, a loose form of linen underwear. They are baggy and often sag, requiring constant adjustment. Then, over the chemise, you pull on a wool tunic, or kirtle. This is your main garment, thick, heavily fulled, a process that shrinks and mats the wool fibers to make it denser and more wind-resistant, and smelling distinctly of lanolin and smoke. It's heavy, like wearing a weighted blanket, and it restricts your movement, but the weight is a comfort. It is mass that holds warmth. A mainstream historical fact, the quality and quantity of a peasant's clothing was directly tied to their wealth and status. While the lord might have multiple outfits of fine, brightly dyed wool, the average laborer might own only one or two sets of sturdy, practical clothes, worn until they literally fell apart, with every scrap being reused for patches or stuffing. Your feet are a particular point of vulnerability. Your shoes are simple, made from a single piece of leather gathered around your foot and tied with a thong. They're more like leather sacks than modern footwear. They offer little insulation and are quickly soaked through by the damp ground. To combat this, you pad them with layers of straw or rags. It's itchy and uncomfortable, and the stuffing needs to be changed frequently as it becomes damp, but it creates a crucial layer of dead air between your skin and the frozen leather. In the absolute worst cold, you might own a pair of thick socks, but they are a prized possession, often knitted from coarse, homespun wool. A quirky tidbit. Archaeologists have found evidence of patterns, wooden overshoes that would be strapped over the leather shoes to elevate the foot above the mud and slush, a crude but effective medieval version of galoshes. You look at your sodden leather wraps and dream of such a luxury. Your hands are another battlefront. Gloves, as we know them, are a luxury. You might have mittens, which are often just squares of wool or fur with a thumb sewn on, offering minimal dexterity. For most work, your hands remain bare, exposed to the biting air until they are red, raw, and cracked. You learn to tuck them under your armpits or into the folds of your tunic during any brief pause in labor, stealing back a few moments of warmth. Your head is almost always covered. A simple coif, a close-fitting linen hood, is worn under a heavier wool chaperone or a felt hat. A tremendous amount of body heat is lost through the head, and covering it is not a fashion choice but a survival tactic. Historians still argue whether the clothing of the medieval peasant was actually sufficient for the harsh winters of the Little Ice Age period, or whether chronic chilblains, frostbite, and respiratory illnesses were simply an accepted, miserable part of the seasonal cycle. Finally, if you are fortunate, you have a cloak. This is your roof when you are away from the hearth. It's a large, heavy, often unwieldy rectangle of thick, densely woven wool, fastened to the shoulder with a bone or wooden pin. In the wind, it can feel like wrestling a live animal, but when you wrap it tightly around yourself, it becomes a portable shelter, trapping a pocket of body-warmed air against your torso. It is your blanket when you nap, your windbreak when you walk, and your only shield against a sudden squall of sleet. Dressed in this full, cumbersome regalia, you are slower, heavier, and constantly aware of the weight of your own survival. Every movement requires more effort, every chore is more arduous. But as you step outside into the gray, frigid morning, the wind tugging at your cloak, you feel a grim sense of preparedness. You are not just wearing clothes. You are wearing your house, your bed, and your primary weapon against a world that wants to freeze you solid. As the last vestiges of gray twilight fade from the shuttered windows, the true nature of the medieval night reveals itself. It is not merely dark, it is a profound, consuming blackness, absolute and heavy. The fire, now banked to a deep red glow of embers, provides no light to see by, only a faint, pulsating warmth. In this darkness, sight is useless. The world becomes a landscape of sound, smell, and touch. And it is through touch that you understand the final, most intimate strategy for survival: the consolidation of body heat. Personal space, a concept you once took for granted, is now a dangerous luxury you can no longer afford. The center of the single room is dominated by the bed. It is not a piece of furniture for one or two, but a large wooden platform heaped with mounds of straw and rags, serving as the communal sleeping quarters for the entire family. Parents, children, grandparents, all together. In the deepest cold, even the family dog or a precious lactating you might be invited into the mix. There are no separate blankets. Instead, there are heavy, coarse-woven wool covers, and perhaps, if the family is relatively prosperous, a bed rug, a thick, felted textile that is laid over the entire squirming mass of bodies. You climb in, your layers of wool clothing still on, only removing your damp shoes and outer cloak. The straw crunches and shifts beneath you, releasing a dusty, sweet and sour scent. At first, the experience is one of pure chaos. A child's cold foot finds its way into your back. An elder's rhythmic snoring vibrates through the shared mattress. Someone mutters in their sleep. The air under the covers is thick, stifling, and smells overwhelmingly of unwashed humanity, wool, and the faint, ever-present scent of wood smoke. But slowly, as the bodies press closer in a shared, unconscious quest for warmth, a change occurs. The initial discomfort gives way to a creeping, collective heat. The shivering stops. The desperate, individual cold is replaced by a single, shared warmth that builds and circulates within the cocoon of bodies and blankets. This is not comfort as you once knew it. It is a biological necessity, a primitive and profound sharing of life force. A mainstream historical fact. This practice of communal sleeping was the norm across all social classes for centuries, not just for warmth but also for safety and because separate sleeping chambers were an unimaginable extravagance. The family bed was a literal and figurative thermal unit, and its efficiency was a matter of survival. The boundaries between individuals blur. You are no longer a single person shivering in the dark. You are part of an organism, a thermal collective. The warmth of your neighbor's back becomes the warmth that saves your front from the chill. The soft exhalations of the person next to you fog the shared air under the covers, adding a minuscule amount of humidity and heat. You learn to sleep in fits and starts, waking when the collective shifts, when a cold draft finds its way in, or when the pressure on a limb becomes too much. A quirky tidbit: some folk beliefs held that the breath of a healthy person could strengthen a sickly one, and that sleeping next to a child would grant them vitality. A charming, if unscientific, justification for a practice born of sheer, pragmatic necessity. Historians still argue whether this extreme physical proximity fostered deeper familial bonds or simply created a resigned tolerance for a complete lack of privacy, where the concept of individualism was subsumed by the overwhelming needs of the group. Lying here, pressed on all sides by the breathing, stirring forms of your adopted medieval family, you feel it is likely both. There is a strange, deep-seated comfort in this animal closeness, a primal reassurance that you are not alone in the fight against the immense, silent cold that waits just beyond the bed's edge. The night is no longer a solitary vigil. It is a shared respiration, a collective dream in the long, dark heart of winter. The warmth you generate together is a tiny, defiant sun in a frozen universe, and for a few hours, it is enough. The warmth from the communal bed lingers like a fading dream as you emerge into the frigid dawn. But the fight against the cold is not just fought with fire and wool. It is also waged in the belly. The gnawing hunger you feel is different now. It's not just a signal that it's time to eat. It's a deep, primal demand for fuel, calories to be converted directly into internal furnace heat. The summer diet of fresh greens, grains, and the occasional egg is a distant memory. Winter's larder is a testament to preservation, a collection of dense, durable, and often monotonous foods designed for one primary purpose: survival. Breakfast is not a meal. It's a dose of sustenance. You receive a thick slab of dark, coarse bread. This is not the airy, fresh-baked loaf of harvest time. This bread is days or even weeks old, made from rye or barley flour, packed with bran and often containing bits of chaff or even peas and beans ground into the mix for bulk. It's so hard you could use it as a hammer. You dunk it into your wooden bowl of weak, sour ale, a beverage known as small beer. It has a low alcohol content, but the brewing process has made the water safer to drink than the icy water from the well, and it provides a few extra calories. The combination is chewy, sour, and deeply unsatisfying to a modern palate, but it sits in your stomach like a lump of warm lead, a base layer of fuel. A mainstream historical fact: the medieval peasant diet was overwhelmingly carbohydrate-based, especially in winter, with bread and pottage, a thick stew, forming the core of nutritional intake. Meat was a rarity, often reserved for feast days or the Lord's table, though preserved pork from the autumn slaughter might be used sparingly to flavor pots for weeks. The main meal of the day, if you're lucky, is the pottage. It simmers in the same iron pot that has hung over the fire for months. Its contents are a slow-evolving mystery. The base is usually oats or barley, boiled for hours into a thick, glue-like porridge. Into this go any available vegetables: onions, leeks, cabbages, and turnips from the root cellar, all softened and muted by the long cooking. The primary flavoring is salt, a precious commodity used heavily to preserve the small, hard chunks of salted pork or bacon that might be added. There is no pepper, no exotic spices. The taste is one of salt, smoke, and earth. You eat it directly from the pot with a wooden spoon, the heat of the food spreading a welcome warmth through your core. This is the engine of your warmth. Your body will work for hours to digest this heavy, fibrous mass, and in doing so, it generates thermogenesis, internal heat. A quirky tidbit: some resourceful cooks would use a pottage stone, a cleaned, heated rock that was dropped into the stew to help it cook more evenly and keep it warm for longer at the table, a simple but effective piece of thermal kitchen technology. You watch the simmering pot and wish you had one. As you eat, you feel the effect. It's not the fleeting warmth of a hot drink, but a slow, radiating heat that builds from your stomach outward. It's the warmth of metabolism, of a body being actively stoked. In the depths of winter, this feeling is more valuable than any taste. You eat until your stomach is full and heavy, not for pleasure, but for the thermal payload. Historians still argue whether the average peasant was in a constant state of calorie deficit during the winter months, slowly burning through their body's fat reserves, or whether the careful preservation and rationing of foodstuffs provided just enough energy to sustain the lower levels of physical activity the season permitted. Sitting by the fire with a belly full of pottage, you feel a temporary, drowsy satisfaction, but the underlying hunger is never truly gone. There are few snacks, no quick bites. A handful of nuts saved from the autumn foraging, a dried apple ring that is leathery and sweet. These are rare treats. Every morsel is accounted for, part of the calculated ration that must last until the first greens of spring. Drinking is also a source of cold. The ale is stored in barrels that are often nearly frozen. Taking a drink sends a shock of chill through your system that takes minutes to overcome. You learn to sip slowly, to let the liquid warm in your mouth before swallowing. Every aspect of consumption, from the hard bread to the frozen ale, is a tactical engagement in the war for warmth, a daily ritual of fueling the fragile fire within. The full belly and the shared warmth of the bed can only do so much. As the days shorten into a mere handful of gray, twilight hours, a different kind of cold begins to seep in, a cold of the mind. The physical world contracts to the small, smoky sphere of firelight, and the world beyond the shuttered windows becomes a vast, black unknown, filled with sounds that are no longer familiar, but threatening. The wind isn't just wind, it's a chorus of wailing voices. The creak of a frozen tree isn't just a noise, it's the footstep of something unseen. In the immense, silent, and frigid dark, the line between reality and superstition wears dangerously thin. The fire's dance is no longer just a source of warmth, it's a scrying pool. You find yourself staring into the embers for hours, your mind, starved of external stimulus, beginning to project shapes and stories into the glowing forms. That flickering log becomes a dragon, that collapsing heap of ash a crumbling castle. The stories told by the elders are no longer simple entertainment, they are cautionary tales, maps of the invisible world. They speak of the wild hunt, a ghostly procession of spectral riders heard in the heart of the winter gale, a portent of death or war. They whisper of household spirits, like the hob, who might help with chores if appeased with a bowl of cream, but who would pinch and harass you if offended. A mainstream historical fact. The medieval worldview was deeply animistic, believing that spirits inhabited natural features like forests, streams, and stones. The long, dark winters provided the perfect conditions for these beliefs to flourish, offering explanations for misfortune, illness, and the terrifying sounds of the natural world. You find yourself participating in small, protective rituals without even thinking. You toss a pinch of salt into the fire, hearing it crackle and pop, a sound believed to drive away evil spirits. You make sure a piece of iron, like an old knife blade, is near the bed, as cold iron was thought to be anathema to witches and fairies. These aren't just quaint traditions, they are a psychological defense system. In a world where a cough could turn into a death rattle and a failed crop could mean starvation, having a ritual, a way to feel some semblance of control over the uncontrollable, is a vital coping mechanism. A quirky tidbit. In some regions, people believed that sin-eating could occur in the winter, where a hungry spirit would consume the stored sins of a household, leading to bad luck. Leaving out a specific type of bread on the windowsill was thought to sate them and protect the family. The darkness plays tricks on you. The scurrying of mice in the thatch becomes the scratching of a demon trying to get in. The moan of the wind down the smoke hole sounds like a lost soul begging for entry. Your dreams become vivid, feverish things, populated by the folkloric creatures from the stories. You wake with a start, heart pounding, unsure if the shadow that just moved in the corner was a trick of the dying embers or something else. Historians still argue whether the prevalence of supernatural belief in medieval peasant culture was a form of mass psychological stress response to a harsh and unpredictable world, or a genuine, integrated part of their understanding of reality that provided comfort and meaning. Lying in the absolute blackness, listening to the village seem to hold its breath, you feel it is undoubtedly the former. The mind, confined and chilled, creates its own ghosts to explain the terror of the void. Yet, within this fear, there is also a strange, strained kind of community. The shared stories, the collective adherence to protective rituals, bind you all together. You are not alone in your fear. The entire village is grappling with the same invisible threats. The long, cold nights become a time for storytelling, not just of terror, but of wonder. Tales of saints who tamed wolves, of hidden treasures guarded by frost giants, of the promise that the sun, though distant, has not abandoned the world forever. These stories are the fragile candles held against the psychological cold, a shared fire for the mind to huddle around, waiting for the slow, inevitable return of the light. The night feels eternal, a solid thing pressing against the shuttered windows. But eventually, a change comes. It is not the triumphant golden dawn of summer, but a slow, grudging lightening of the world from pitch black to a deep, weary gray. The cacophony of fear and superstition that ruled the dark hours recedes, not vanishing, but retreating to the shadows of the rafters and the corners of the mind. The silence of the deep night is broken by a new sound, the tentative crow of a rooster, hoarse and brittle in the frozen air. The longest night has passed. You have survived. But survival has a cost, and the dawn reveals the bill. The ritual of rising is slower, more painful than usual. Every joint protests. The damp cold has seeped into your bones, leaving a deep, persistent ache. You untangle yourself from the knot of sleeping bodies, your breath exploding in thick, frantic clouds. The first order of business is the fire. The embers from last night are frighteningly faint, just a few dull red eyes peering from a mound of gray ash. Your hands shake, both from cold and from the desperate urgency, as you coax them back to life with dried moss and the smallest, driest twigs. The moment a tiny flame licks up, the relief is so profound it feels like a physical warmth. You have safeguarded the heart of your world for another day. As the weak light grows, you dare to open the shutter a crack. The world outside is transformed, locked in a stark, beautiful, and deadly embrace of frost. Every blade of grass, every twig, every roof thatch is sheathed in a crystalline layer of white. The air is so cold it hurts to breathe, feeling like shards of glass in your lungs. The mud of the path is frozen into iron-hard ruts. You look towards the animal pen and see your breath catch. The water trough has a thick skin of ice that must be broken with an axe so the animals can drink. A mainstream historical fact. The Little Ice Age, a period of regional cooling that particularly affected Europe from around 1300 to 1850, brought with it winters of legendary severity, where rivers like the Thames froze solid for months, and frost fairs were held on the ice. But for the peasantry, it meant catastrophic crop failures and a desperate struggle for basic survival. You pull on your stiff, frozen shoes, the damp leather like ice against your skin, and step outside. The cold hits you like a physical blow, stealing the breath the fire had just given you. You make your rounds, your movements clumsy and slow. You check on the sheep huddled in their lean-to, their wool thick with frost. One of the older ewes looks listless, her head drooping. You feel a pang of fear. Her loss would be a blow to the family's future. You check the woodpile, doing a mental calculation. It has shrunk alarmingly. The careful stockpiling of autumn now seems recklessly inadequate. A quirky tidbit. In some chronicles, there are accounts of frost saints, unofficial local figures people prayed to for deliverance from the most bitter cold, a testament to the sheer psychological and physical toll these winters took. There is no joy in this morning, only a grim assessment. The night has left its mark. A persistent cough echoes from a neighboring cottage. A child cries, its voice thin and reedy. The village, which felt like a tight-knit fortress against the dark, now feels fragile, a collection of souls clinging to the edge of a frozen abyss. Historians still argue whether the resilience of medieval communities was born of a deep, ingrained fatalism, an acceptance of hardship as God's will, or from a fierce, pragmatic determination to protect their own, no matter the cost. Standing in the silent, glittering landscape, watching the smoke from your own chimney struggle to rise in the still, frigid air. You feel it is a fragile combination of both. The hope for spring is not a bright, eager feeling, but a desperate, deeply buried seed, waiting under the permafrost. You have survived the night, but the cold has taken its payment in exhaustion, anxiety, and the slow, steady erosion of comfort. The war is not over. It has merely entered a new, equally demanding phase. The long, silent wait for a thaw that still feels a lifetime away. The wind has finally lost its knife's edge, softening to a breeze that carries, for the first time in months, the scent of wet earth instead of pure ice. The relentless, gray lid of the sky has cracked, revealing patches of a pale, hopeful blue. The snowdrifts, once formidable white barriers, are now slumped and granular, retreating to reveal patches of muddy, thawing ground. The silence of the deep freeze is broken by a new, constant sound, the drip 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 of water from the thatched roof, a gentle, percussive music that is the first true anthem of spring. The war is not won, but the siege has been lifted. You stand in the doorway of your cottage, feeling a weak but genuine sun on your face. Its touch is no longer a mockery, but a promise. The profound, bone-deep ache that has been your constant companion begins to ease its grip, not gone, but receding like the tide. You take a deep breath, and the air no longer stings your lungs. It smells of decay, yes, of the winter's long accumulation now being revealed, but underneath it is the smell of life, of potential. The world is not just less cold, it is awake. You look around at the village, seeing it with new eyes. The soot-stained cottages, the churned mud of the path, the ragged figures of your neighbors emerging from their own hibernation, it all looks different in the light. It is no longer just a fortress against the cold, but a community again. The tension that held everyone in a tight, inward-focused knot slowly unravels. Voices are louder, laughter rings out, unforced and genuine. The shared ordeal has left its mark, a weary understanding in every face, but also a hard-won, collective pride. You made it. You endured. The work that awaits is immense. The winter has left a legacy of repairs, to homes, to tools, to bodies. But the work feels different now. It is no longer a desperate act of preservation, but an investment in the future. The rhythm of life, so long slowed to a near standstill, begins to quicken. The memory of the cold will remain with you, a deep scar on your consciousness. You will never again take the warmth of the sun or the comfort of a full belly for granted. The long, dark night of winter has passed, and you have emerged on the other side, not unscathed, but immeasurably stronger, carrying the quiet, unshakable knowledge of your own resilience into the bright, unfolding promise of spring.